Welcome, everybody. We are back. We are once again here for another incredible interview. I'm so excited to have my guest on and to talk about something that I think is so important, something that I, up till recently, didn't put a whole lot of thought into. And that was the products that we use on our skin. And that's a whole new topic and something I think a lot of us don't think about. I know I didn't. It was something that never really, I never put a lot of thought into it until I saw the presentation that our guest did for Funnel 3, which was incredible. And it just led me to start really thinking about all of these products, which actually led me, guys, to going around my house in the bathroom and looking at all the products that we use and my wife uses and just seeing what was in them. I was just shocked, actually, of all the stuff I couldn't pronounce and I didn't know half of it. And I was just really shocked how many ingredients are in some of the products that we use every day. And I just thought, this is a topic I don't hear a lot of people talking about. It's not covered. We cover natural law. We talk objective morality. We get into principles. We get into conscious parenting. I've interviewed people about so many of these important topics, but not too much, even on dieting. I cover dieting. We get into supplements. So these are a lot of the areas that I cover in depth, but I never really got into skin products and breaking down natural versus man-made. Is one better than the other? These are all important topics. So I'm really excited to have my guest. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce her. She did an amazing presentation for Funnel. It was one that sparked me to bring her on the show. I think it's just an important topic, as I was saying, the science of self-care. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in my guest. Welcome, Angela Umelo. How are you? I'm so excited to finally make this interview happen. I'm here to discuss this. This is, I think, an important topic. I really do, Angela.
Hi. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm glad we finally got a chance to actually connect and put this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just want to get into I want to dive into this, Angela, because this was like I just said, an incredible presentation. One that it was like I was just saying, it's a topic that I didn't put a lot of thought into. I could seem to cover everything else, and it was just one that kind of I guess it went under my radar. I wasn't really aware of all of these different products that people are putting on their skin, even washing your hair with. And then I think of the clothes that we're wearing. It got me thinking of what dyes and chemicals are even in all the clothes that we wear every day. And does it affect us? Does your skin absorb it? Because you hear people saying like your skin absorbs like almost everything it touches. So I'm here to learn and ask you these questions. So wherever you want to start, maybe let everybody know a little bit about yourself, what you do, what made you want to do this presentation, and we can go from there.
Okay, great. Well, like I said, happy to be here. I've been in the cosmetics industry for a long time now. I mean, all of my career, I studied a cosmetic chemistry and then went straight into developing in the lab. I wasn't always sort of 100% focused on natural chemicals and ingredients. You're not necessarily taught in that way. You're using what works essentially in the traditional sort of science-based mindset. I had an incident where I was weighing out something like parabens to make a lipstick, and my teacher screamed at me. She was like, because I didn't put gloves on and I wasn't like protecting myself from using it. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm making a lipstick. Why would I be worried about the ingredients that I'm using? Like, why are you freaking out? So I kind of dismissed it, thinking, well, there's obviously nothing wrong with it. She's just overblowing it. But then, as you go on, you start to realize, well, a lot of these ingredients and chemicals that you're using, especially when you're formulating them, you're using them like in their 100% pure form, are not necessarily, they can be kind of toxic. So then you're putting them into products, which, maybe at a very much reduced level, it may be a different case toxicologically, but it's still a consideration. So as I've moved in my general lifestyle towards being more natural, vegan, etc., I've sort of started fusing together those two worlds. Well, they seem like two separate worlds, right? Of science and chemistry versus like sort of natural, holistic lifestyle and living. And so throughout my career, I've been trying to see ways that we can sort of do better ultimately in terms of the general day-to-day stuff that we're doing, whether it be in our makeup, in our skincare, body care. Like you said, there are so many ingredients and raw materials that are being used, and generally you're not encouraged to really ask much questions about it. You kind of just go along with, this is what works and this is what you want to get this effect, this is the best thing. And there's so many things that have been created to enable us to do that. And this is the nature of our species, right? We like to improve upon things. We like to
That's true.
continue to expand and refine things in some way. And that's the beauty of what we do, right? It's from our intelligence to be able to do that. At the same time, sometimes when we get very focused on industry or financial gains, certain other principles sometimes fall to the back burner. And that, I think, is one of the fundamental problems in what we're facing when it comes to skincare, body care, and self-care.
That's a great point, Angela, and that's what I want to get into. It definitely there's so many little like topics that I want to get into because I think this is it's a bigger picture. And like I was saying just at the beginning, one that kind of slipped under my radar. I was focusing on so many other things that I didn't think about just the everyday products that we use. And now that I am aware of it, I'm hyped. Now I'm really aware of it. Like now every product I use now, I'm like, I don't know, I noticed me flipping the label and reading it, and I'm just really more conscious of the things that are I'm putting on my body. And I really think it's something that a lot of people just kind of they kind of overlook. They're looking and focusing on bigger things. Now, the one thing that you talked about in your presentation was the regenerative principle and how important that is. Why is it important? And what do you mean by the regenerative principle? Maybe we can start at that aspect.
So ultimately, I think it's placing the aspects of self-care at some level of importance in your world. Like we're out here, a lot of people out here, fighting the good fight, right? There's a lot of broad and deep concepts. There's a lot of sort of gravity in terms of what people are trying to do to sort of move and shape the world. So then taking care of yourself can sometimes seem selfish or less important in some ways. So I think that it's just to remind people that there is a key element of like, stop taking a second and making sure that you're doing stuff to regenerate your own self so that you can continue to go out into the world to help and serve other people. And that's where, our beauty care and our skincare products come into that. That's the process of taking care of yourself. That's how we sort of implement some of the most basic steps of our self-care. When people are depressed or suffering from some mental illness, etc., it's one of the first things that you're going to see become less important. They can't take care of themselves. They don't want to they have no motivation to take care of themselves. So I wanted to just re-emphasize the importance of that, to keep yourself active, to keep yourself with the energy to be able to do all the bigger stuff in the world. Having these sort of basic rituals, so to speak, of how to take care of yourself will help to keep you and help to regenerate your energy as well.
That's really cool. That's a great point, and something that I thought about a lot when I heard you speak about it in your presentation. And because I have a disability. I don't like to call it that, but just for so people understand, I do have a condition that limits me drastically, and there is days, and even for maybe 3 or 4 days, and sometimes longer at a time, where I'm basically bedridden. And I notice that the longer that I'm not doing my ritual of my rituals, like my morning rituals and my self-care rituals, as you call them, it has an effect on me mentally, for sure. And then I notice as soon as I start feeling it, like as soon as the pain passes and I can start getting around a bit better, and I get back into my ritual of getting in the shower, just the simple act of having a shower and making yourself feel better and getting dressed, and it has a really positive effect on at least I can only talk for myself, but for my whole mood. Like it just seems that this ritual is so important. And you're right. I think that's one thing that when people are depressed or for there's probably many reasons, it seems that their care for themselves kind of is what starts to lack. And you're saying that that's so important. At least I even noticed for me, as I was saying, it is that the ritual of just that whole ritual of getting taking care of yourself.
100%, right? And just taking that time to focus on oneself for that moment, even if it's like 10 minutes in the morning in your shower, that's your time, right? And that's your time to reflect. That's your time to sort of rejuvenate in some shape or form. So I think it's important to then think about what products and what you're actually using to do that process as well at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. It's just a great thing, and I'm going to keep saying it. I'm sure during this whole interview that it's just, I think, an area that people they kind of overlook and don't realize the importance of it. And once you brought it, like in your presentation, it came forward and you brought this up, I just really thought about it. Like, wow, it really does matter. My little rituals in the morning that I do to get ready really set the mood for the whole day, to be honest. If I have a great morning and everything's going great, and I have my shower and I get dressed and I feel great, it's kind of just sets the whole tone. So it's very important, I think. And the one thing I wanted to ask you about, Angela, was the skin. Now, this is something I've heard people say, and I'm hopefully you can clarify and maybe clear up some um, things that people say. But I've always had people say that your skin absorbs anything that you put on it, like 80%, and the number seems to vary who you ask, but that your skin absorbs pretty much everything that comes into contact with it. How true is that? Is this not true? Like, I need to know.
So it's just not as simple as that, right? It's kind of like, yeah, I've heard it from 60% to 80%. Like,
Right.
so I've worked with many different brands in the industry for throughout my years of a career. And, I was speaking to one of the brands that helped to sort of, propose this idea and put it out there as part of their marketing spiel. And they were kind of like a little bit, what's the word? Gleeful about how they've sort of managed to put out this information, how people use statistics. Now, it's not there's nuance, just put it that way. It's if certainly everything you put on your skin isn't going to absorb. The fundamental nature of your skin is to provide some kind of barrier and protect the skin. If we have literally absorbed everything, we pretty much wouldn't be alive, right? We're living in a soup of chemicals every day through our air, through our water, everything that we're doing, right?
Right.
However, that doesn't mean that nothing absorbs. It doesn't mean that there aren't ways to make things absorb. When you go down the more pharmacological route, especially for drugs that you want to do, you want sort of topical drugs, you have to work very, very hard to find ways to make sure that drugs and things can penetrate. So you use certain materials that can help things to go deeper into the skin. But for the most part, it's quite difficult for most chemicals to penetrate fully. Even if they penetrate through to the top layer, which is the dead skin layer, the stratum corneum, they don't necessarily get further into the dermis and where the blood vessels start to lie. So that's where when people are sort of getting very concerned about the penetration of ingredients, it's not, like I said, don't worry about it. It's just there's nuance. And so you don't have to be like, oh, everything that I put on my skin is absorbing, so I have to, if I can't eat it, I can't put it on my skin. That's not really true. Pay attention. Look at what it is. Look at the holistic environment that you're using it. Look at the area of the body that you're putting it on, right? All of our skin is not created equal. We have thinner areas under our eyes. We have our lips, which obviously don't have the same stratum corneum layer to protect it. We have other areas of the skin where your skin is very thick. So you have to look into all those kind of details to make that kind of assessment. So on aggregate, it's not true, but that doesn't mean, like I said, go lie in a pool of toxic material and think you're going to be okay. No, but just don't get so hyped up and worried now that if you put like anything on your skin that you're suddenly going to die and absorb it. It doesn't work like that.
Okay, cool.
You can sit in a bath of beans and you're not going to absorb all of it, right? It's just not going to happen.
Right. No, that's good to know because as you said, like you even heard numbers that vary. I've heard people say like 60%, then you get up to people like 80%. Some people have told me 90%. I'm like, okay, I got to find out more about this. And so I'm glad that you really did clarify that. And I think that makes sense too, because you're right. There's definitely certain areas of your body, the skin is thicker than others. And I think there's a lot of variants that go into just that statement that your skin absorbs everything. So I'm really glad that you clarified that. The one thing another thing I wanted to ask you about, because we're kind of like talking about products. Now we hear a lot about this, about natural products, and then you got man-made products. And now maybe you can break down each of these, because you hear it, like, I want to get into the marketing because this is what they really like to market lately, is that it's all natural, it's vegan friendly. Like, we're going to touch in all of this because I think this is so important, because there's some marketing trickery going on. I know there always is when you start looking a little bit deeper in the surface. So let's break down natural. What do they mean, natural versus man-made products?
Well, sometimes it can mean it depends on the brand, right? Some brands will claim natural, but if you actually looked at their ingredients list, you may see that there's not a whole lot of natural ingredients in there. So that's where you have to sort of look beyond what the branding, beyond the visuals, and sort of get into that ingredients list. Now, you're going to look at that ingredients list, and you may see certain ingredients that don't sound like they're natural. They're just not a common plant name. but they may be naturally derived. And so there's natural, like literally straight from the earth, an extract of a plant. Then there's naturally derived, where you've used a plant material to extract something that you're going to use for some other purposes. You might see that, for example, in more functional materials like emulsifiers, things that help you to mix your oil and water together. It's essential that you have something like that, and you might use a plant material to extract the ingredient. And then you've got more man-made ingredients that essentially they're usually from a natural ingredient like petroleum, which is natural, but they've been heavily altered in some shape or form in order to create something completely different. So the nature of the way people think of it, obviously, is that when you can recognize the ingredient and it's easy to pronounce, you feel more of a sense of trust. You feel more at ease with it. When it starts getting a little bit more chemically sounding and a little bit more unfamiliar, you don't know what processing has gone into it, and so it can be difficult to decipher, and it can be difficult for people to decide, especially if they're trying to live a more natural, holistic lifestyle. Sometimes we have to manipulate certain ingredients. For example, some things you take directly from the earth, they may contain a high level of heavy metals. So when you've put the product together and you send it for testing, you're going to get a high level of heavy metals coming back, in which case you're going to have wanted to get materials that have gone through some kind of refining process a little bit, just to remove things like that. So that's where it becomes nuanced in terms of being able to decide whether you want naturally derived or man-made. Vegan is a different thing ultimately.
Right.
Do you want me to go in? I can.
Oh, I definitely, yeah. I definitely want to dive into the vegan one for sure, because that's another marketing thing that I hear all the time, and vegan means so many things. Well, at least when I hear it, I think of so many different. I hear so many people coming at it from different ways, and I think it will be an important one. But I'm glad that you kind of broke down the natural versus man-made, because I think when you hear natural, I think everybody assumes that because it's natural, it's good, and I always. I mean, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm always thinking, just because it's natural, there's a lot of poisonous things in nature too. Nature doesn't always mean good. I mean, there's a lot of dangerous things in nature too. So, but the way they market it and sell it to people, it's very deceptive. I think they kind of just say natural or and it just puts people in a certain mindset, not thinking that there is things in nature that are harmful. And then it's on the flip side, Angela, is when you talk about man-made products, a lot of people think that because a man's kind of intervened and changed things, that it's you should be wary of it.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a middle ground. I think that if you go too far one way or too far the other, you're off the mark. But there's got to be a middle ground where there is some good things when people are working with products, and there's also some dangerous things when you're talking natural. I mean, it's just, to me, there's a middle ground. Am I right? Or
Totally. I mean, I think when it comes to the cosmetic space specifically, I mean, the goal is to definitely have ingredients that are safe to use.
right.
That is one of the overall overarching concepts that most scientists are trying to have anyway when they're developing products. The thing with natural ingredients that you have to consider is, for example, essential oils. Some of these have high levels of allergens. So you can't just think, okay, because if something said perfume or fragrance versus something saying essential oils, you think the essential oils is better, but the essential oils can sometimes have more allergens than the fragrance might have. The problem with the fragrance is you as the consumer don't know what the ethos of the brand was around creating that fragrance. Is the fragrance cleaner? Did the fragrance have phthalates? So that it raises more questions, but it just, so in this sort of dichotomy, it's simple as in, you can't just say, okay, because it's essential oils, it's better. You may still have allergens. You can't say because it has fragrance, it's worse. It may have been refined to be a cleaner fragrance. You have to ask the questions. You have to look into the brand's ethos. You have to understand the context and the environment within it's being used. On aggregate, I would say, when I'm formulating and we get what's called the material safety data sheet, for the most part, when you're using natural oils or natural extracts, the material safety data sheets are pretty safe. There's not much concern about spillage or, cover your hands, wear a mask to use this ingredient, compared to some more synthetic chemicals that can have sort of You do have to take a lot of precautions
Mm-hmm.
before you're using them. So that's where you can say in a very simple way, if you're trying to be very basic, to say, natural ingredients tend to be a little bit milder and kinder for the most part. Essential oils are kind of the exception to that, where we do have a lot of sort of more hazard warnings around them.
Oh,
So
interesting. That's really interesting because essential oils I hear a lot about too. I actually have essential oils, so and I know in their concentration, they're powerful. Like it's
yeah,
really shocking. Like these little bottles, and then a lot of the times when you'll talk to the people that know about them, they're like, be really sparingly with this is powerful stuff. Like you're
exactly.
dealing, and I'm just like, okay, and they're right. Like a little dab goes a really long way. So I think you're right. Like you got to do your research and kind of know what you're dealing with, and
Yeah.
so
You got to know
great
your own
advice.
skin and your needs as well, right? If you have a skin that's highly reactive, you might want to avoid essential oils. You probably want to avoid all fragrance and essential oils in general, right? If you have sensitive skin. I think the other thing to on the flip side is that where people think because it's natural that it doesn't do anything, right? That it's completely innocuous, that it's completely safe, that it's not, and to the extreme that they might even think that it doesn't really work as well. I mean, we have potent medicines, right? And
Yep.
potent skincare that come from Earth. So nature has a lot of power in it. The overarching principle that I would say I even embody myself is that we work well. We work synergistically with things that come from nature. When it comes to things that have been manipulated by mankind, there becomes questions. There's more questions because we don't necessarily know why they manipulated it, to what end, to what benefit. Was it financial? Was it for safety? Was it to make the material more abundant? We don't know what exactly has happened in terms of why this material has been manipulated, and that's where you have to sort of get into a little bit more of the ethos and the principles of the brand that are using the ingredients. And for us as formulators, we have to get into the ethos and principles of the raw material creators. What is it they were doing? Why did they manipulate these ingredients to perform in a certain way? Why couldn't they just take the ingredient that is? So one thing that comes up a lot with natural is availability, right? We've
Right.
used ingredients in the past in cosmetics that we've later found out we're kind of raping the land. There wasn't an
Mhm.
abundant source of it, and we had to either stop using them, or they've got banned, or restricted use, or you just couldn't get them to develop your products anymore because we've taken too much of it, and then nobody was looking at and trying to balance out exactly how it's being used. And that's where then the man-made or the science or the lab created thing has more leverage, so to speak, in that, okay, well, we don't have to go and take these from the things from the land anymore in a way that is uncontrolled. We can create them in the lab. There's some nuance to that. I'm not going to say I fully support that in every sense, but there may be certain cases where that could be beneficial, right? Is there a way that we can work with the land in everything that we're in anything that we're trying to extract, so that we don't end up just exploiting it and diminishing the resources at the same time? So there's always a balancing act. But I think this is
Right.
the principle ultimately is, how do we be more conscious of everything that we're doing as we're doing it? So we're not just taking all the resources, or we're not just like, okay, well, this is cheaper to do it in the lab and doing it, this is safer. This is, what is our fundamental ethos behind why we're doing what we're doing. And ultimately, it should be about care. It should be about what's best, what's healthiest, what's best for the consumer, ultimately, what's safest for the skin. That should be the leading principle behind every
Mhm.
decision that we're making.
That's a great point that you bring up, Angela. I was as you were saying, I was really thinking about that. When you're talking about natural products, we also have to think about there is a cost to that. As we talk, as more people want natural products, there is a you're I don't want to say taxing nature, but there is a cost to having things natural, as you were just saying. Like, how rare is the product that you're trying to harvest? Is it, there's a lot of things I think that go into that whole aspect of nature. And I think you just bring up a really great, powerful point that, the more that people want things natural, there is a cost to nature because we are
Yes.
taking it from nature. And but as you said, there's a balancing act, and I can kind of see, like you said, where science kind of kicks in and says maybe we can do it and not be so taxing on nature. I just see it's more complicated than people think as you start really diving into it and drilling in on it. And it's an aspect that I think is really important, that the more natural products we have, they are coming from nature. There's
Yeah,
a price, is what I'm trying to say.
exactly. And I'm I'm not a supporter of the sort of scarcity mindset. I believe the world is abundant,
I
but again,
agree.
it becomes then if people are not being mindful about what they're doing, if people are not approaching this with a consciousness, then they will just rape the land. They will just take the ingredients
Hmm.
without thinking about how they're replacing
Yep.
it, right? They will just like knock down trees so they can grow a particular crop so that they can make more money from it if they're not really thinking about it holistically. So everything just always has to come back to that ultimately for us to make the right decisions as a species.
That's a great point. Yeah, and I hope that's a really great point. I'm glad that we touched on that, and I think it's important. And it's going to have me thinking more about it now. After this interview, I'm going to be thinking about that even more. Like all these natural products, there is, I agree though. I think there is definitely nature. There's abundance, but we have to be conscious of it, and it comes down to that. So that's just something I know I'm going to think about more, and a great aspect. Now let's get into like vegan. This is the one we were just about to touch on, and one that I talk to so many people that are either on the road to being vegan, they're going vegan. You hear all about vegan friendly products, and I just want you to really like break this down and dive into this, because I think this is a big area, and I have my thoughts on it, and so I'm sure I'll share them as we go on. But when they say, like, what do they mean vegan friendly when they're talking about products? What is all of this? This is such a big topic. So wherever you want to tackle it first, and we'll go from there.
So I would say first of all, just people need to separate the concept of vegan in food from vegan in beauty products and cosmetics
Okay.
somewhat, because it's fairly in food it's fairly self-explanatory, right? Vegan food, and whether that's healthy or not is a whole nother concept.
Right.
In the beauty world, the term kind of gets conflated with natural and good for you and kind to the earth and organic, and it sounds very caring. That's just the nuance of the world once you say something is vegan, but it doesn't
Hmm.
mean any of that necessarily, right? There's a lot of products out there that are full of uh, ingredients and chemicals that you probably wouldn't consider to be the most healthy, but they're vegan because they don't contain anything of animal origin. For the most part in beauty, we were quite limited in the types of products that we really take from animals for beauty uses. So things like obviously cow's milk and goat's milk and things like that, eggs. Um, those are the sort of main things. Bee products, honey and beeswax are common, and then things like carmine, which is from beetles for coloring. Those are probably the main ingredients that people were really using in beauty products. There's a
Okay.
few other things from like animal fats, but that got a lot less popular from an industrial perspective, because especially back in the was it the 90s when there was like mad cow disease or something like that and all these kind of things, there was a lot more restrictions on the types of ingredients that you could use that were coming from animals, a lot more bureaucracy and red tape you had to go through when you were using anything from that. So it became actually better to take things from whether it be petroleum sources or other plant-based sources rather than animals. So when
Okay.
people are talking about vegan in beauty products, often for the most part, it means that the beauty company didn't use beeswax, they didn't use carmine, and they didn't use things like maybe some milk extracts. And then, so it's very easy, really and truly, especially when you're using more synthetic materials, to be vegan. So it's nothing to do with natural, it's nothing to do with healthy, it's nothing to do with organic. It doesn't really mean anything. It's very low hanging fruit if you're trying to be ethical in terms of your approach to being vegan as well. That's my sort of
Interesting.
perspective on it. It's been a big move. It's been a big shift in the industry for us. A lot of questions around that, and often, you know, and I say it's like, okay, well, people are concerned about whether somebody's using beeswax in their product, but they're not concerned about, eating In-N-Out burger. So it's a bit like, okay, if you're really concerned about veganism, maybe there's some other areas you want to approach first rather than being concerned about, if beeswax doesn't even harm the bees, right? So
Right, yeah. I remember when I was younger, the big thing that like the big turn in products, and I remember was whether they were tested on animals and stuff. And I'm not even sure if products ma- uh, m- uh cosmetics are even tested on animals anymore. I don't know.
okay,
Um I
so
would like to
testing
ask
animals is
you,
another. Yeah, so
right,
veganism then is also conflated with non-animal testing, which again
right.
isn't necessarily the same thing. So cruelty-free. So in various different countries, they've implemented different laws about testing on animals. So it's at different stages in terms of what's been legislated. Most brands and companies stopped initiating any testing on their products a long time. I can't even think. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and nobody that I've ever worked with has been sending their products to be tested on animals.
Wow.
Ingredients was a different thing. And a lot of the ingredients that are used in cosmetics are also used in pharmaceuticals. So a lot of them do get tested on animals, and some of them still will get tested on animals for pharmaceutical purposes, not necessarily for cosmetic purposes. And that becomes a difference. So what they've implemented in the cosmetic industry is more of a cutoff point to say, well, this material that we're using hasn't been tested on animals after, I think it was 1991.
Okay.
So since then, this ingredient hasn't been tested, but the actual process of brands testing and putting mascara on bunny rabbits, I don't know when that was last done. The only exception is when you're entering a market like China. For foreign brands to sell their product in China, often they have to have shown that there has been some animal testing for safety purposes, and that's a whole different area. But for the most part, most brands are able to start telling people and showing people that their products are cruelty-free. They haven't tested their final product on animals, and the ingredients that they're using haven't been tested since 1990s on any animals.
Oh, that's good. Okay, I'm glad that you clarified that. That's a big one because I just remember, like I said, when I was younger, I remember seeing a documentary, and that's the reason I brought it up is because they were showing way back when they were actually testing different eye makeups and that on these animals, and it really messed me up for a while. Like I'm an animal lover, and then to know that we were doing this, it's good to know that that's not the normal anymore. So
Yeah,
I'm glad that we kind of talked about that because that documentary messed me up. That video I saw, and I was just like, wow. So it's good to know
yeah,
that we're moving away from that. But it also kind of leads me into, like, I remember in your presentation when you were talking about some of the buzzwords that people use. And I think that's cool that we maybe touch on a few of them because you hear a lot, like we were saying, we've talked about vegan and we've talked about cruelty-free products. So that's one that I didn't even have written down. I'm glad that we touched on, and all of these other kind of little buzzwords, because some of the buzzwords that you hear is plant-based, and maybe you could, what do they mean by plant-based? Is everything in the product based? Is it all plants or is it a mixture of both?
no.
What do they mean by that? Oh no.
I mean, that's the assumption that people make conveniently, right? When they say it's plant-based, but I mean, you can get plant-based sponges right now, right? Would you eat them? Probably not. Right. So I liked plant-based because even so, like I said, where you have natural materials that you can take directly from the earth, and they're literally just extracts, almost as pure and unmanipulated by any processes, right? Then you get plant-based or naturally derived ingredients. And it's not that it's a bad word, it's just that if you assume then because it says naturally derived or it's plant-based, that it's as the same thing as what's just been taken from the earth, it's not. It's been manipulated in some shape or form. They've just used a natural starting point to extrapolate the molecules that they're going to use. How far they've manipulated those is the question mark, right? How much manipulation has happened is something that you won't be able to fully decipher just from hearing the plant-based terminology. Now, this is in beauty products, and I feel like it's a necessary step for beauty products because we can't always just take everything from the earth. Sometimes things from the earth won't do the full job that you might be trying to do in makeup and this is, there's certain needs that we might have from our beauty product, certain expectations of the performance that we might have. And therefore taking something from nature, using some kind of process to create something else and calling it plant-based is probably a better way than using something that's completely synthetic. Now, when it comes to food, it's a slightly different thing because
Right.
food should be natural. Food should essentially, it doesn't need to be plant-based. It's just a plant is a plant. An apple is an apple, right? If you had
Yep.
a plant-based thing, something has been manipulated that probably the question is, does it need to be, right? Food does grow from the earth, and that's kind of how it feels like it should be, right? That feels
I
very
agree.
organic process for us as humans to eat food that hasn't been manipulated, because there's no need to manipulate it.
I
And I
agree.
think then it
Yeah.
raises a whole bunch of other questions once you start to manipulate it for food purposes. For cosmetic purposes, you might need to manipulate it because, like I said, if I give you the example of emulsifiers, you have an oil, you have a water, you want to mix those two things together. They don't mix together. You need something that holds them together. There's various petroleum derived ingredients you can use that do that. There's various PEG base, which is polyethylene glycol emulsifying. And these are chemicals that have been manipulated using some kind of carcinogenic material to create a molecule that helps to hold oil and water together. I steer away from those, right? I would rather use
Okay.
something that is plant-based, where they've used something that's extracted from an orange peel or from coconut oil to create an emulsifier that then I can use to mix my oil and water. And now I can create a plant-based ingredient, a plant-based formula that is better for you than maybe the more synthetic ones, and performs better than something that was just pure oil or just pure extract from the earth.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad we broke that down because you hear a lot about that, the plant-based. Now, what do they mean? Because this is another one that I hear a lot of is medical grade. Like you hear always people saying like this is medical grade. Does that mean it's safe? Is that a good thing? What kind of break that down?
The term doesn't really mean anything. I mean, again, it's just, it would be a marketing term that people could use to try to imply that their products are more superior or more powerful in terms of what they do. There are certain ingredients that if you were to go to a dermatologist, they would probably recommend you and have a lot of scientific substantiation, things like retinols or hydro, so it's the depigmentation. My brain's gone blank. Vitamin C, even. There's certain things that even doctors might prescribe you if they were doing something for your skin, and retinol might be one of those ingredients, for example. So if you're a brand and you're making products and you want to call it medical grade because you're using those sort of scientifically backed ingredients, but other than that, there isn't really a grading system in that, but that would be the closest thing that you would be referring to there.
Very, very interesting. What I'm learning just by our discussion, Angela, is that marketing, they really are really focusing in on the marketing. And what is worrisome to me is that kind of like what we're touching on in this whole interview is how they've really taken certain words because they know how people are going to have an emotional reaction to it. And so they stick all these buzzwords into their products, and I'm sure even at some point we've all fallen for it. You see the word natural, or you see medical grade, or you see plant based, and you assume that these words are powerful, and even at a subconscious level, I think as soon as we see them on a product or we read that it's in a product, it just leads us down this path. And so do we have to be leery of marketing? This seems like something I think people have to maybe focus in on more is how they're marketing the products. Like you have to go deeper than what just you're reading or seeing, correct?
Totally. I mean, it's an industry, right? The goal is to sell products and to make money. And if you find convenient words or shortcuts that you can, put in there that allow people to make their own make their own assumptions and
Mm-hmm.
trust your product more, love your product more, believe your product works more. I mean, that's what you're going to do, right? To be able to sell more product. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's the industry that I've worked in. People do need the products. It's a genuine need. Nobody
Right.
in our industry created the need. It's one of those industries that, regardless of what's happening in the world, it's self-sustaining because people always need a shampoo. People always need a body wash, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that in that sense. But I guess as consumers, in terms of being discerning, in terms of not falling for any sort of traps or being misled, it does require you to really get to know the brands you're buying from, and also to have a little bit of understanding about ingredients. And then, so you can see the word natural, maybe it'll get your attention first and foremost, but you
Right.
don't stop there, right? Just go a little bit further, actually look at the ingredients list. Okay, now you see some ingredients in there that maybe don't sound so natural. You might have to do a little bit of a search just to find out a little bit more. You might even reach out to the brand. I even do that sometimes. Reach out to the brand and be like, hi, what is this? And brands, they have customer service. They're happy to tell you and help to explain a little bit more about what they're doing if they haven't put it onto their website. And that might seem like a lot of work, but it's also like it's interesting for you as your learning process, so that you're not susceptible to just sort of marketing trickery, which ultimately most industries fall to when it comes to it, right? To sell product.
They really do, and this is a question I don't even have written down. I just thought of it now, and I'm glad that I actually thought of this. This is another misconception, and maybe it's true, and maybe you can put some clarification on it. The more expensive the product, does it mean it's a better product? It's more safe? Does the value of a product, of a cosmetic, is that a sign of the quality? Is it just marketing? Like, I know, I'm sure it's a big area I'm asking you. It's probably a lot of things going in, but does it necessarily mean better, safer, or any of those terms? The higher
No.
the value of it.
In short, no. I
Okay.
mean, there's nuance to that, right? I worked in the contract manufacturing side. That means we get different brands coming to us for products, and some of the products we've already developed beforehand. We might make one product, we sell it to a brand that sells in a supermarket, and we sell it to a brand that sells in a high-end department store. Same formula. Nothing changed. The only thing that changes is the marketing and branding, right? And the margins that the different brands are getting,
Right.
in some cases. Now, when it comes to actually formulating, it's an important question. When I'm formulating, I do have to ask, okay, what is your target price and what are you looking to sell? Because there are certain ingredients that are just more expensive. So if you are in a prestige market, you do get a little bit more leverage and opportunity to put ingredients in that are more expensive compared to if you're selling in a mass. So I don't know if that adds a little bit of nuance to it. It means no, but
Yes.
sometimes.
I kind of figured that because I'm just thinking, like, just because sometimes something's more expensive doesn't always mean that it's better than
No.
the cheaper brand. But then I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. It's a hard thing to answer a simple yes or no. And it's, once again, I think you'd even agree, Angela, that comes down to start doing some of your own research of what products are in it. But it does kind of make sense what you said. Like, if you want to put in higher end ingredients, it's going to cost more. And I even know for some of the natural oils that I've purchased, some of them get expensive. They're like,
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
really expensive. The one that shocked me was rose petal
Rose is
extract.
insane.
Oh my God, I could not believe the price of it. I was like, what is going on with roses? Like, why are they?
Well, it's
But I
because
don't know why.
the amount of roses you have to use to get that tiny little amount of essential oil is
Okay.
the thing, right? And that's so it is a very expensive process for that, because
Oh,
you don't get a lot of oil, so you get a small amount from it. So I would say, like, if you're trying to make that assessment, you have to look at the ingredients list. So, for example, if you buy a really expensive product and the first ingredient is something like petroleum or mineral oil, those ingredients are not expensive, right? So there's no
mhm.
justification for why their products would be super expensive, really, and it's really based off of that. If you look at buy an ingredient and their first ingredient is, something more exotic, even a shea butter is way more expensive than a petroleum based product. Most of the natural ingredients are way more expensive than a lot of those synthetic man-made ingredients. So you have to look at it and sort of gauge and understand what it is and what benefit you're trying to gain from it. What is this person claiming? If somebody's claiming, like, okay, we're making a vitamin C serum, for example, and then the first two ingredients is like water, glycerin, and then like a whole bunch of other stuff, fragrance, and then somewhere down at the bottom there's like just some vitamin C extract. You might wonder how much is in there if they haven't told you, right? You have
Okay.
to raise certain questions, like to sort of read the ingredients list somewhat. Now, it's not a science in that self to just read the ingredients list and understand from the position of ingredients. It gets a little tricky because some ingredients would only be in there at a low level, even if they're effective. But you do have to, it's a starting point, I would say, especially if you're making that gauge on whether this is the value of the product. Look at it, talc, mineral oil, petroleums, a lot of those ingredients they're really cheap. They don't cost a lot of money. So there should be no reason why a product should be over $200, $300 in their first ingredient be petroleum. It's no
Okay,
call for it.
that's really Right, that's really good advice, and for people to start looking at their ingredients and when they're choosing, even when the cost of a product, it's going to make. I hope it's going to make people more aware to look at the back and kind of assess it, especially for the high end products. What are you paying for? Is it marketing, or is it because they're
Yeah,
putting superior products in? There's a lot going on, so I think that's great
exactly.
advice. Yeah, great advice. And the one thing now this is something that I was telling my neighbor about when we were talking. I was telling him that we're going to be doing this interview, and what he it was actually a surprising question that he gave to me that he wanted to ask you, is that we hear a lot about recycling, and that's a whole new thing that I've been looking into. Like how much it's shocking how much isn't they claim is recyclable, but they don't. When it comes to cosmetic products, he was thinking of the containers that these products come in. Is there any do they put any consideration into the impact on the environment of just like I would have never thought of this. I'm surprised he did. But are they is there people making efforts towards really being conscience, gee, I can't pronounce it anyways, of what the products are coming in? Are they hoping to go with more recyclable products, or is that what they're claiming? Or I'm just
Yeah.
really curious about that whole, if you even know, or
Yeah, no, it's definitely there's a few topics that have been growing a lot in people's awareness recently, and definitely the sustainability of the packaging is a key one. The industry has approached it in various ways. One being using recycled plastic, so plastic that's already been sort of gathered from the sea. So we call it post-consumer recycled plastics, a PCR. So a lot of people are using that to make new plastic materials in their packaging. Refillable is another way of doing it. So if people can avoid you buying more, you buy it once and then you just buy a smaller, less packaged refill. So those are probably the two main ways that have been seeing success. When it comes to actually finishing your product and recycling it, that is a little bit more challenging. A lot of at least in the past, a lot of packaging manufacturers were creating a lot of mixed materials, and those things were not possible to recycle. As
okay.
everybody's sort of grown in their awareness, brands and consumers have sort of started to put more pressure onto packaging manufacturers also to start being more aware. And they've started to try to create what we call mono materials. So just one type of plastic or one type of material so that it doesn't get mixed, which makes it easier to recycle. However, once we get into certain other nuances, like the product being in there, whether it's clean, whether you can actually take out the rest of the product, whether the packaging is too small, once it gets to a certain size, you can't often recycle it. So there's been sort of more independent initiatives like Pact, that, for example, where they make an initiative to gather back cosmetic packaging, so that they can make a move to get it recycled. This has had to been more independent companies that have started in order to try to help the industry to do better with that field. Ultimately, better materials, more, there's arguments for glass, there's arguments for metal. I've seen brands now using things like ceramics even. But ultimately, plastics is still the main one we go to, but PCR is probably the best way at the moment that people have found to try to reduce their impact. Being able to
That's
recycle
right.
afterwards, it's challenging I think for every industry at this point right now.
Oh, I would agree, but it's really hopeful that you're saying that, because people's awareness is that's increasing, that at least some of the companies are actually listening and trying to find different ways. So I mean,
100%.
we're heading in the right direction. Is
Yeah,
a good way to look
everybody
at it.
wants to do better. Like everybody, literally, I don't know if I sound too like optimistic and hopeful, but I feel like most humans on this earth would like to do better, would like to
Yeah,
try to have a healthier, safer earth that we're not sort of abusing and destroying in some shape or form, right?
right. I
So
agree.
it just happens that it sometimes becomes less of a priority sometimes in industry because they want to sell things. But with the raising of human consciousness, it's just becoming necessary, and every company at every level is having to consider sustainability, the effects, the ecology, the safety aspects of it, because consumers are waking up and going, hey, asking these questions: is this safe? What happens to it? what is the whole product life cycle, rather than just me use product goes somewhere. I don't know. Everybody's raising in their consciousness, so it's a beautiful thing to see ultimately.
It really is, and it's happening in so many different areas, which is also, I think, a great thing to see. I see it with people's, they're becoming more conscious of the food they're intaking, of
Mhm.
what every aspect. A lot of, I'm like you, I kind of see everybody. There is a lot of people. There is a lot of awoke people. A lot of the sheeple out there, I like to call them, that just kind of go along. But I also see another side of it where there is people, they're becoming very aware, and they care, they really do, and they're trying to improve. It's a lot, there's a lot going on. I always tell people that life is busy, people get busy, life is complicated, it's not an easy one answer fits all, but at least I want to believe that we're heading in the right direction. And even when it comes down to something as simple as the products that we use every day, at least even when we're just talking about the packaging, that they, at least people are aware of it and they're trying to change it. It's in the
100.
right direction, as I was saying, and that's a great
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah. Just starts with asking questions, right? If people just become, wait, let's ask the question. Where did this come from? Okay, wait, let's ask the question. Where did this go to?
Yeah,
How is this produced? Right? Rather than just like assuming it just appears from nowhere and just ends up, I don't know,
yeah.
yeah. And that
No,
once people
I
start
get
doing
it.
that, everybody has to step up their game and really start looking into it. I was
Yeah,
just going to mention, like in my presentation, I talked about the mica, for example, which was an ingredient that we were using a lot in cosmetics, and it's naturally derived, and people preferred mica to talc, but nobody was asking the question about where it was coming from, and a lot of the mica that was being used was being mined by children in India, so child labor
wow.
in really dangerous conditions, and it was really brands really had to question their ethics, right? That the
Mhm.
fact that they had been using these ingredients and not asking the question, and nobody asked where it came from, where it went to, how it was derived, and it was naturally derived, which was good. So everyone was happy, but nobody was really thinking, in a higher level of consciousness to really ask about the whole supply chain. And I think that's the important thing. And as everybody starts asking more questions about everything that they're using, everybody will be forced to do better.
I totally agree, and I remember that in your presentation, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's important. Is that we're like, I think about that with so many products, like, as we're making things cheaper, and we're, but there's always a price. I always keep remind myself of that, as for anything, there's equal, and there's this yin and yang going on, there's this balance, and okay, we're getting products cheaper, and what's the price though? Like, who's making them, and what are the conditions, and what, there's a lot going into it. And then, like you were just saying with the health, with this mica, like, okay, yeah, it's a natural product, it's all natural, but what is the price for this product? And so there's a lot, becomes into, you have to start asking more questions. And I just think people are starting to do that, but I think we need to do it more, because everybody likes a cheap price. Like, right, if you
Exactly.
get something cheaper, but what is the price that you're paying ultimately for
And
something?
totally. And in the industry, for example, the price of getting like this is mainly in color cosmetics, the ingredient was used, and mainly for like the pearlescent and colorful pigments that people were using. The price from getting it from a country that wasn't using any child labor, that had
Mhm.
really strict laws, that you knew was from a really good source, that had been purified and refined so it didn't have heavy metals. The cost of materials is so much different from getting it from like a lower end company who was probably using child labor to get their cheap
Right.
raw material, and probably had high heavy metals and everything else. And the cost of the product is insane. So if as a company you're just thinking about profits, the answer is like, well, I don't need to ask, I don't need to question where it came from. All I know is I'm getting it really cheap and I get to make more money in my margins. But the choice in that sense, if that was your first principle, is obvious, right? You're not going to go for the super expensive, highly refined whatever from the German company. You're going to go for the cheap crap, basically,
Right.
that
Yeah.
because the consumer's not going to know the difference and you're just going to make more money. Great.
Yeah.
But you can't do that in this day and age, right? Because consumers will come for you. Consumers are going to
It's
ask that
true.
question now. Like, where did that come from? How did you source it? And brands, and some of the bigger brands even, have acknowledged that, and to avoid lawsuits have had to take extra steps to make sure that every ingredient that they're using has come from a good supply chain, so they're not going to be held accountable for like they're not going to get caught out. They have to you have extensive like paperwork that you have to fill out to show them that everything that you're using is ethically sourced, is sustainably sourced as well. You're not, you know, going to the Amazon rainforest and taking this plant from the natives without, you know, just so you can make money. There's a real drive behind the scenes and a lot of efforts going on to make sure that things are being done in a better way.
That's great to hear. It just shows people's consciousness is raising, and you know they're starting to ask questions. I think that's a great thing. I never saw any problems asking questions and seeking out knowledge. I think that's so powerful. So I'm glad that we touched on that. Now it kind of this ties in greatly to where I was going to lead next, was into is there an organized and if I pronounce this wrong, is it Makra that the place that monitor that is they monitor the cosmetics, and it's a regulation act that of 2022. Is it stand Makra, or am I pronouncing that wrong?
So yes, modern oh god, I forgot what it stands for now.
The
Modernization of Cosmetics Act. Something like that.
There you go. So what did they are they monitoring all aspects of this? Is it so safe?
This is totally new. This is brand new. So as of 2022, it was announced. And then actually this year, by the end of this year, they've started to implement some of the processes that brands and manufacturers will have to go to register and let the FDA know what they're making and who's making it, basically. Now, let me be politically correct here somewhat, but let's just say there's been a journey of people being alarmist and very concerned about what's going into cosmetics, who's making cosmetics, are their cosmetics safe? And so there's been a lot of initiatives and drives towards clean beauty, where people have been calling for more regulation and more legislation around beauty products in the United States, because for the most part in the United States, it was self-regulating. Here, if you do something bad, you get sued, essentially. So it's pretty self-regulating. It's not good business to kill people. So generally, most brands subscribe to that. But there's been a lot of initiatives to move towards creating more regulation here, because people feel like you can't trust brands, and government needs to sort of control that for people to feel more safe. So MOCRA has been introduced as a way for people to basically, now brands have to register before they launch a product, and manufacturers also now have to register, and they have to be part of the FDA has to basically give them a license, so to speak, to be able to operate as a manufacturer, which you didn't have to do before. Is this making us safer? I'll leave that for you to decide.
I was gonna ask you that. Like, I mean, I'm just right now, my so-called spider senses are going off, and only because the word regulation, and I get it. Let me see if I can word what I'm trying to think as you're saying this, Angela. What I'm thinking is, okay, they are forming Makra so that in this sold as a good thing, that they're going to be really monitoring these products. But my brain's also thinking is, are they going to make it so difficult for companies to even bring out a product? Is it too much? Could they go the opposite way and make it so difficult that nothing ever, like, things kind of never get developed? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just restrictions and stuff. I just have all these words going off in my head. Like, oh my God, like, what if they make things even worse?
Essentially, red tape does tend to affect smaller brands and innovation. Right. Because once you start getting caught up in the bureaucracy, it does tend to stifle innovation as we go forward. I think where they are now, it's very early days, so it remains to be seen. They've given some exemptions for smaller companies below $1 million in revenue to be able to not have to fulfill all of the requirements. But after that, yeah, I think it remains to be seen. Definitely moving more towards a European style system. In Europe, there is definitely a registration process before you launch a product onto the market. There is more checks on your formula, toxicological checks on your formula, etc., that have to be done before you can launch a product onto the market, which, you know, people can say is very good, because
Mm-hmm.
it makes them feel safe. You don't have to trust it. Again, if a brand is just out to make money, you don't know if they've checked and made sure that everything is safe for you. So to have a law that says you have to makes some consumers feel more appeased by the
Mm-hmm.
industry. And so that's why, because the US wasn't doing it, there was a big drive to get the US modernized in terms of the regulations.
Okay.
It remains to be seen what may come of it. Let's just put it that way. I think um, we haven't had serious issues, I think, from not having that regulation. Even the issues that we have had, for example, like the major talc lawsuits, etc., wouldn't have been prevented if this law had been in place, right? Because
Okay,
that was
interesting.
already a super big multinational company that already had everything in place, had so much systems in place for regulating their own processes and before they launch a product. The something like Mocra wouldn't have prevented Johnson and Johnson from selling, uh, baby talc. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't have. It doesn't. So it wouldn't necessarily have created a safer environment from that perspective. I said, I think for
Hmm.
the most part, most brands have good intentions. Most brands don't want to harm or kill their consumers. They want to sell
Right.
product. It's not good business to harm people. So
I
it's
totally
never
agree.
good.
Like you said, it's so new that, right? Like, I mean, this is, like you said, this is very new. So, I
Yeah,
mean, it's like time will tell what this is all going to
yeah,
shape out to be. So,
exactly. So we'll
very,
see how it
very.
starts to shape the industry and what kind of, if it starts to create boundaries or limits on people as we go forward, which inevitably it will do to some extent.
Is this going to affect people that make products on, like, that make their own products and they kind of sell on, like, from their own website, or they is Mocker going to affect them? Are they going to be regulating them too, or is this separate from that?
Well, depending on their revenue, if they're less than $1 million, if they're small business, they might be exempt. If they're
Hmm.
over a certain amount, then they will have to register their products.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
registering, just letting the government know what you're making and what's in it, we could say
Yeah. Okay. No, it
no
makes
harm,
sense.
no
I was.
foul. They haven't yet
I'm.
said you cannot do something. They haven't yet said, this is banned, or, they haven't imposed any restrictions on any ingredients or any, further, sort of list of banned ingredients or anything like that. They've just said right now you have to register, you have to report if there's any adverse events, if your product causes any irritations, you have to have a reporting system. So it's just right now, it's mainly checking in, just their eyes
Okay.
are watching, basically.
Interesting. No, that's. I'm just wondering because I just know people that do make their own products. They make great products too, and so I'm just wondering if that would affect them. It was just something that came up. So no, that's great that you broke that down. I'm just trying to. Now, let's just kind of bring this full circle, Angela. Like, I wanted to ask you, for people that are going out, and since you know cosmetics so well, people that are using cosmetics, what are some of the things that you should look for in a good product? And I hope that's not too broad, but if people are going to buy like any type of cosmetic or even skin cosmetics, any other thing that would fall under that category, what are some of the things that they should look for in a product, a good product?
So I would say, first of all, okay, so there's some basic needs that you might have, right? Which obviously maybe your body wash, shampoos, conditioner. So these are like what we might consider to be like the essential products. Because my first point would be keep it simple, right? Um, we've gone into a time of consumption where it was like more is more product, more of this, more layers and layers of product and makeup and everything else. And I would say ideally, it's not always necessary. So if you can keep it simple, you kind of make it a little bit more manageable for yourself and keep it,
Okay.
work with your essentials. Now, when you're approaching that, you're going to pick up an ingredient or pick up a product off of a shelf. First thing you're going to do is the same as you might when you're looking at food, look at the ingredients list. For the most part, you're not really going to understand everything that's in there, right?
That's true.
There's various apps that can give you some insight to some of the ingredients that are in there. And I would start by looking, it would probably be helpful, let's say, if you look for ingredients that are more natural, more organic, because normally on aggregate, brands that have thought about those processes have already been more conscious in their development process. There are marketing, there are, you know, ways that people want to make money, but on aggregate, and this is just more from my perspective of working with different brands, people that are wanting to have their brand in certain positioning are already a little bit more conscious and a little bit more aware of the ingredients that they're putting into their formulas. Support small brands. A lot of small brands, you know, it's coming from the person who's making the product uses the product themselves, right?
That's
and that
true.
gives you a level of trust. If you're making a product that you're selling to some foreign land over there, a lot of the time there's not a lot of care put into it. If it's a small business that's making that product themselves, they probably put a lot of care and a lot of thought into what ingredients are going in there. So once you look for more, if you lean towards more natural ingredients, I tend to incline more in that direction. Organic ingredients, smaller brands, smaller companies, small businesses that have put more effort and thought and love into each of the products they're making. Use apps to sort of help you to decipher some of the ingredients list somewhat as well. Look at the brand ethos. You know, it's you might just be shopping in like a CVS or whatever, right? And there's a lot of products and you just need to pick up your sunscreen and go, right? And you're not really into it. But if you can take a little bit of time and try to look at who the brand is, what is their principles, what else are they doing in the world, right? Because if they're part of a larger organization that is doing harm somewhere else, do you want to support that? You know, so those are the sort of questions that I would start if when it comes to choosing products. Now, what products you're using is really depends, right, on what your needs are. I know men in general use a lot less products than women. Men generally manage to keep it simple with, you know, one product.
That's the truth.
One product that does everything, cleans their house, washes their car, and they're managing to function in that way. How do you choose from your, it's really down to your need, and then know your skin type as well, right? Like I was saying, if you have sensitive skin, just looking at natural may not be the only thing you need to look at. You might need to be wary of certain key ingredients. You need to get to know what ingredients work for you and don't work for you. So I hope that answers your question. It's kind of like there's some specific needs. People often send me their, you know, before they're buying a product, they'll send me like an ingredients list and be like, is this product good? What do I think of this? Or what should I use if I have a particular skin concern? How do I approach it? So there's sort of nuances depending on what your needs might be.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, Angela, and that's great advice. I think that's a perfect advice that you could give somebody. It's a tough one because, as we were saying, everybody's different. So, and everybody's needs are different, but I think that's some great general guidelines, especially. And I think we learned, like, you really taught everybody so much during this interview, just about some of the buzzwords that people are hearing, and that what they mean and what to look out for. I just think that this is really important. I think it's an area that needs to be talked about more personally. It's an area that I think gets kind of overlooked. And so I'm really glad that we did this interview. I learned so much, and I was really excited to do this one. I find it really fascinating. And as I was saying earlier, I look at all these products now around my bathroom, and that I'm really curious now what's in them, and even the expensive ones. And I'll look at a cheaper one, and I'm comparing now, really more conscious of what I'm putting on my body. And so I think it's a great topic. And just to wrap it up, I want to give you the floor. Is there anywhere that people can go and check out your products? Is there any websites, anything that you want people to know, or what you're working on, anything like that? So I can leave it in the description of this interview, Angela. Anything that you want people to know where they can find your stuff, the floor is yours.
I work with brands. I work with brands who are developing products. So I work with them from a top line technical, what type of ingredients you might want to use. And then I work with a lab in terms of the development and formulation of those. So you can visit saltandearthlabs.com, which is my company, if you're looking to develop products. I'm not selling products myself. Maybe some point in the future, who knows? But for now, I'm there to sort of help and support other people in terms of making the best brands and products and ingredients that they can use.
That's awesome. And I'll make sure, Angela, I leave that link in the description so you guys can go and check it out. If you have any questions, you can definitely ask Angela about products and that. She's easy to talk to, as you can see, very knowledgeable. And thank you so much, Angela. I really, really enjoyed this interview and learned so much. So I just want to thank you for taking the time and coming and talking to all of us and just breaking down this topic. I think it's a big topic, and I think we covered a lot of ground. And I just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing and making sure that products are safe and high quality. I think that it's amazing. So thank you.
No problem. It's been a pleasure to be here and talk about these kind of subjects. So I think we still have a lot of work to do overall, but I think most people are on the right path, and that's a good thing to see.
I agree. I agree. So thank you so much, Angela. If you want to wait just in the background for about 30 seconds, I'll wrap up this show. And is that cool?
Totally.
All right, perfect. I'll be right back with you. There you have it, my friends. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview as much as I did. I want to once again thank Angela for coming, talking about this topic and these just breaking things down. A lot of these buzzwords, natural, man made, what does this all mean? Vegan, all of these buzzwords that we hear every day. And, you kind of just have this, idea of what these products are and what these words mean. So I really want to thank Angela once again for coming and breaking this down. I found it super informative and interesting. That's why I wanted to get her on the show to kind of talk about this. And I hope it's going to lead you guys to kind of being a little more conscious of products you're purchasing and what's in these products and how safe are they and all the things that go with that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys have learned as much as I did, and it's going to make you want to look into this a little bit deeper. This is such a big topic, and you can only cover so much ground, but I would definitely, I'm going to be asking Angela to come back in the future because I'm going to have more questions. I already have more questions that I want to write down and ask. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and watch this interview with me. I appreciate all of you. I really do. You guys are amazing. I get such great feedback from all of you. Don't forget that if you also want to watch me live at Revolution Radio, I'm on twice a week there. I'm on Thursday nights in Studio A, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, Monday nights, Studio A, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as well. And you can find me. That's at revolution.radio there every week, guys. So thank you. Take care. Stay safe and take care of each other. Love yourself. And remember, you're the greatest. And I'll see you soon with another great interview.